Hi, I'm Gary White for Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television, and I'm here with State Senator Jimmy Higdon, who is with the 14th District here in Kentucky and covers Marion County as well as Nelson County, and as we've said before, goes all the way from Louisville down to Casey County. And we are here because we're going to talk about, there's been activities going on. Of course, this is still the summer that we're together right now, but there's been a special session that we want to touch upon. There's been signing of bills that come into.
That's correct, Gary.
And there's the Real ID as well that we want to touch upon. So there's lots of issues that still go on even when you're not actually allegedly in session, right? Right.
We call this our interim period, and we do meet in Frankfort monthly from June through December. And we have meetings. All of our committees meet jointly with the House. The Senate and the House committees meet jointly once a month. We generally, the years past, we've staggered those through the month. So, you know, I could be in Frankfurt 3 days a week, some weeks, but now we do all of our committee meetings in 1 week. It makes it a session type atmosphere. And it's starting to, you know, people are catching on that all legislators are there all week, and there's starting to be a lot of activity, and which is good. I'm having a lot of constituents schedule appointments with me and come to visit during that week. And again, it's a really tough work week because, like I said, it's all day, every day, but it makes it is convenient. And it makes it easier to schedule the other 3 weeks of the month because you're not running back and forth to Frankfurt. So this is an experimental session to do this. You know, Senate and House leadership will meet in December and decide if we're going to do it again next year. And there's pros and cons to doing it that way, but it does save the state some money. Mainly in travel expenses, and so we'll see it, and it does create some hardships too. But I think the good outweighs the bad, and hopefully we will continue this the way we're doing it. A lot of states are do their legislative meetings during the interim this way. So again, it's an experiment that we want to have.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so let's talk. Recently, you were in Frankfurt for a special session.
That's correct.
And that was dealing with the pensions, correct?
That's correct. We passed a bill in the regular session that the governor vetoed, and we passed it right in the session. We didn't have an opportunity to override his veto. So there were some issues with that bill. They could have been corrected in the next session, but the governor vetoed it, and then we go into, he called us back into special session, mainly because the quasi-government entities, you know, right now, Gary, the state, all the state agencies are paying 87%. That's their match to their for the retirement. You know, the normal cost for retirement is 6%. We're paying 87%. That's to pay down the unfunded liability. So those quasi units, which are health departments, regional universities, rape crisis centers, comp care, and just a lot of different agencies that are not really state agencies, but they do work for the state. Those agencies, we had froze their rate at 49%, which is still, you know, a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But that was costing the state $125 million a year to freeze those rates. Those rates were set to go up on July the 1st if we didn't act. So we did have a special session. We froze those rates for another year, and we also put into place a system for those agencies to be able to leave the Kentucky retirement system, to be able to they had basically 3 options. They could pay their unfunded liability and leave. They could pay their unfunded liability over 25 years, and they could leave, or they could stay in and pay the 87%. So that was, where we ended up. And so there is some, a lot of people are they're still asking for changes to that. So that will be an issue the next session, and you will definitely see bills filed to change what we just changed, to try to make it better for these quasi-government entities. It's somebody told me not long ago, and it's a quote worth repeating. We'll be talking about pensions till Jesus comes back, and that's true. The only way to gets us out of this issue that where we find ourselves is a lot of money over a long period of time. So we're talking about 25 to 30 years to dig out of this hole that we're in. We didn't get in here. We didn't get in this position overnight. We won't get out overnight. So a lot of money over a long period of time. In fact, Gary, this past 2018 session, when we did our biennial budget, we budgeted $3.4 billion in additional payments to pay the ARC, that actuarially required contribution, which is financing that unfunded liability over a 30-year period. $3.4 billion, 15% of our budget. And this next budget session we do will more than likely, that amount will go up.
Wow. So when the legislature got together and passed something last year, right? But that was vetoed. Will that be considered again? Is that still an option, that plan?
It is. I think everything's on the table. There's a lot of people that supported that bill, primarily because it froze the rates. And now we're starting to hear from them, yeah, we supported that bill, but we want additional changes made to it. So, they were very supportive during the special session when we were passing it, primarily because it froze the rates. And again, they're already calling and meeting with legislators to change some stuff that's in it. That House Bill 1 that we passed during the special session.
Right, but it was an emergency really needed for those individuals.
It was critical that we kept those rates at 49% and not allow them to go to 87, because to be honest with you, there's a lot of those agencies that simply could not come up with the funding and probably faced bankruptcy and going out of business because they couldn't make the pension payment.
Right. So also recently you were in Frankfurt as well for a bill signing.
That's correct.
Because with the session when it ended, when bills are passed, they don't necessarily go into effect right away, right? There's a period. And this was with an expungement bill?
Expungement bill, Senate Bill 57, and it allowed Class D felonies, any Class D felony, with the exception of those that were violent crimes, crimes against children, sexual crimes that are sexual in nature, or crimes of public corruption. Those were not expungible. And Gary, we are a country of second chances, and most of these Class D felonies that people committed and were pleaded guilty to or were convicted of, most of them, many of them, did not spend any time in jail as a condition of their sentence. So they're nonviolent crimes that really didn't put the public in any danger. If the public had been put in danger, they would have served time in jail. And I'd asked the administrative office of the courts, how many people pleaded guilty to a Class D felony and served no jail time as a part of their sentence. And it's over 8,000 a year, and they had statistics back 5 years, so almost 40,000 people over the last 5 years have pleaded guilty to a Class D felony and served no jail time as part of their sentence. They were only served, parole. And So we went back and allowed those folks that have a Class D felony after a 5-year wait to be able to go back to the court, petition the court, and at the judge's discretion, if he deems that the person has paid their debt to society and has been reformed and hasn't had any problems, any run-ins with the law enforcement for that 5 years since their probation ended, the judge at his or her discretion can grant an expungement. And it's really, Gary, it's become an economic issue because for two reasons. One reason is those that plead guilty to a Class D felony used to not be a big deal back before the internet and electronic records. Now you can check somebody's background just as snap of a finger and see that they had a Class D felony, and it prevents people from getting a lot of different jobs. And years ago, those records weren't that readily available. And also, with our, record unemployment, there's a lot of jobs that are available now, and so it allows those folks that made a mistake. A lot of them are young and dumb and did some stupid things, and they're not the same person that committed that felony. So it allows them to get an expungement so they can move on with their life and be able to get a better job and be productive citizens.
Now, there is a process, right, for getting an expungement.
It is. There is a process, and you had to apply. And again, you apply, and there's a $50. You have to pay a $50 fee to just apply. And they do, they check and make sure that you're eligible to get a pardon. Again, they'll check your felony to make sure it's not a violent crime against a child or sexual in nature or public corruption. And they'll also check your record to make sure you haven't offended again in the past 5 years. So if you meet all that criteria, then they will schedule a hearing with the judge, and you go before the judge and plead your case and provide clear and convincing evidence that you are reformed and you're no longer that person that committed the crime. And the judge, at his or her discretion, can grant an expungement.
I know the Career Center here in Marion County, Lebanon Career Center, did have a program on that, and you can get some more information from them if you need to as well in Marion and Washington counties. And
Gary, I get a lot of phone calls. People are welcome to call me to ask about expungement. I've helped a lot of people in that area, so I don't mind a phone call at all. You'll probably put my home phone number at the bottom of the screen when you play this, and I encourage folks, if they have a felony and they're interested in an expungement, to give me a call, and that's for Class D felony only. The more serious crimes are Class C and crimes, and those are not expungible.
Right. Okay. So that's already into effect. Now, also something that has been talked about for a while and is not in effect yet, but we're working towards it, is the Real ID.
Right.
And that's a national effort, right? But here in Kentucky, we have something working on there too, right?
Let me say one more thing about the expungement. The Marion County Career Center has done an awesome job in promoting that. And in fact, they had a seminar or a meeting not long ago for those interested in expungement, and it was standing room only. It was very successful. So hats off to them and the Marion County Career Center.
Right.
There was also
do
one
for Washington County too. So
Washington
Marion and Washington, since they're joined now.
Right, that's correct.
They do have information for either of those two counties.
That's correct. And I attended one in Casey County also. So they're doing a good job trying to get that information out to folks to help them change their life and move on. Right. Sorry I interrupted you about Real ID, but Real ID is it's real. Kentucky has to be compliant, or they are compliant now, but we have till October 1st for those starting October the 1st of next year, of 2020, to fly on a commercial airline, to go into a federal courthouse or a federal Army base. You had to have a real ID. Now, if you don't plan on doing any of those things, you do not have to have the real ID. Now, it's federal law. Kentucky was a little late in complying with the federal law. And so, you know, we have just a little over a year for those that want a real ID to get one. Now, they're not available in you know, Marion, Washington, or Nelson County yet. They're rolling them out county by county across the state. I think, I know Franklin County, they've rolled it out in Franklin County. It wasn't a real smooth rollout, so they have some issues to work through. But the reason I bring this up, Gary, and I did an article in the paper not long ago, and a lot of people have paid a lot of attention to it, and I've had a lot of calls, and a lot of people wanted to get my permission to run that article and use that article, and that's fine. But and that's why I did it, to educate people. Real ID is not for everyone. Everyone does not have to have a real ID. So when you see it on TV or you hear it on the news that you have till October 1st to get that real ID, you do not have to have a real ID. If you do not plan to take a commercial airline flight, you do not plan to visit an Army base, Fort Campbell or Fort Knox, if you do not plan to visit the federal courthouse in Louisville, you do not have to have a real ID. Your standard driver's license, the circuit court clerks will continue to issue your standard driver's license. When they expire, you can get a new driver's license as we have today. So I want to make that clear, and that's part of why we're doing this today, to help educate constituents, and you know, you're primarily viewed in Marion, Washington, and Nelson County, to make them aware that at the circuit court clerk, where you get your driver's license renewed, you do not have to have a real ID unless you plan to fly, visit a U.S. military base, or visit the federal courthouse. If you don't plan to do that, just get your regular driver's license. Now, if you do plan, if you know, flying is in your future, and you travel, and you know you're going to take a flight, a domestic flight, you have a couple different options. You can get your real ID, or you can use your passport. Now, I do not plan to get a real ID. I plan to get a passport card, which is very simple to get because I already have a passport. And it's not that difficult to get, even if you don't have a passport. It's $55 is the cost of the passport card. So if you have a passport, you do not have to have a real ID. A passport will get you on a domestic flight. It'll get you in the U.S. military installation. It'll get you in the federal courthouse. So you have two options if you do plan to fly. If you decide, yes, I want to get my real ID, there's some things that you have to have, and you might want to start looking for them now, because number one, you have to have your birth certificate. And now, do you know where your birth certificate is? I can't honestly tell you where mine's at. That piece of paper is several years old, and I don't know when the last time that I got it out, and I don't know where it's at. Yeah. Before my mother passed away, or before she moved to a nursing home, I always knew it was at her house,
right?
At my parents' house. I'm not really sure where it's at now. A lot of people probably have the same issue. So you have to have your birth certificate. That's number one when you go to apply for real ID.
And usually it's not even a copy; it has to be actually certified.
It's got to be. It's got to have the notary. It's got to be notarized. You got to be able to feel the notary seal. Yeah. You also have to have your Social Security card. And you know, I don't know if most people know where the Social Security card is. I haven't seen mine forever. And you have to have proof of residency. and that could be an electric bill or any kind of something from the U.S. Post Office or through the U.S. mail that's addressed to you at the address that you're going to put on your real ID. You have to have those things to get a real ID. So, you know, you need to be thinking about where those items are located before you get down close to the deadline of October 1st. And also 2020. Yeah, thank you, Gary. Yeah, October 1st of next year. But it's another difference with real ID. When you go in to get your real ID, they will not produce a real ID at the circuit court clerk's office. It will be sent to us to a secured location who you know, makes this new ID, and it'll be delivered to you in the mail to your residence. It probably, you know, take a week or 10 days, maybe even as long as 2 weeks. So you want to plan ahead for that.
Right.
But the real ID is coming, and we want to get that out there. We have a little over a year. Be patient with your circuit court clerks when you go to get that, because if you wait till the last minute, you're going to run into some long lines, because it does take longer to apply and get a real ID than it does your standard driver's license. But the circuit court clerks will continue to issue regular driver's license. So just remember that the biggest issue with real ID for most people is flying on a domestic airline. If you're going to fly, you have to have that real ID. The airlines will and the airports will require that. Right now, it's October 1st of 2020.
Right.
It wouldn't surprise me that the federal government moves that date as we get closer to it. But that is the plan as we speak.
So for the real ID, that will, if you do choose to do the real ID, that will take the place of your current driver's license.
That's
you don't
correct.
even have two.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it will be for 8 years. And when you go to renew that, you don't have to take your birth certificate every time. Now, you know, in Kentucky, when you get your driver's license the first time, you have to take your birth certificate in. So it's a one-time deal, but now that we're working on this new driver's license, like I said, a lot of people are not used to that requirement. So to get that real ID the first time, you're going to have your birth certificate, and that's a big deal.
Well, when you usually get your driver's license, you're a lot closer to when that birth certificate was first given you at that point.
Right.
By now it's a little longer.
You're still living at home, and Mama's taking care of it.
Exactly. And for the real ID, you said that it has rolled out in Franklin County, but can people start going to Marion County, Washington County, or Nelson County to get them, or that time period has not started yet, correct? You
know, again, I'm not sure the date when they'll roll it out in Marion County or Washington County or Nelson County. You know, obviously, like I said, they're trying to work out the bugs in those pilot counties that they've rolled it out in. Right. There's a couple other counties. I can't think of the others. There's only a handful of them, but I do know Franklin County because it's there in Frankfort. Right. The folks from the Transportation Cabinet, I think they've spent a lot of time in Franklin County at the circuit court clerk's office trying to work out these bugs and make it a more streamlined system. And so we will get through this. But I encourage people, once it is rolled out into Marion, Washington, Nelson County, if you plan to get one, go ahead and get it. If you have a passport or you want to get a passport card, you might be thinking about that, and go ahead, and because that's not a real simple process either, and it takes some time. And you have to have the same things for a passport. You have to have that birth certificate. Now, if you already have a passport, you can get the passport cards without a lot of hassle, because you already have a passport.
Right. So once we hear some more about when it's being rolled out here, we'll pass that along as well. But you might as well get your information together if you are planning to do the real ID, because will need it one way or the other. And even if you're not, if you're planning to do the passport, you might need some of that information as well. So start getting it together.
That's correct.
Otherwise, you can maintain your driver's license that you currently have. Now, is there going to be a larger expense as well for the real ID than the traditional?
It is going to be more expensive. I think I might be wrong on this. I think it's $48, but it's good for 8 years instead of 4 years.
Okay.
But I believe I'm correct on that amount. It's $48. But it is more expensive. But again, it is current driver's license is 4 years. Mm-hmm. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's $15. I just renewed mine. I think that was correct, but.
Okay. And also, the reason for, well, one of the reasons for the real ID is kind of standardization as well. Is that correct? So it would kind of be, where now the Kentucky driver's license can look completely different than lots of other states, there will be a kind of a normalcy among the whole 50 states, right?
Right, and they're more difficult to counterfeit. Mm-hmm. and more difficult to make a fake fake real ID. So there's a lot of security things built into these real IDs that make them a more secure document than a current driver's license.
Okay. All right. So we'll keep you up to date as we learn more about that as well. We also want to mention, as we're recording this, it's end of August as we're doing this, but September is actually a preparedness month, right?
It's National Preparedness Month. And in this area we're used to, tornadoes, ice storms, floods, and everybody remembers the ice storm of back several years ago, and how, without electricity and a lot of things that, the confusion that it caused. So this is simply, a time in September to, think about preparedness, flashlight, batteries for your flashlights and those sorts of things. But, and think about, some bottled water, twice in the recent history, the pump station in Calvary has gone out, and we were out of water for a short period of time. So water is important. So bottled water and like I said, flashlight batteries, and some food. If you stash away some beanie weenies or Vienna sausage under the bed in case you have a disaster, and have a plan. Where would you meet up with family? How would you communicate with them? And probably one of the biggest, I guess, concerns going forward is a man-made disaster where somebody hacks our electric grid and knocks our electricity out, or and this the day of electronics. If we don't have electricity, a lot of things will come to a screeching halt, and so just it's good to be prepared.
Absolutely.
And that way, if you're prepared, you won't be less likely to panic if you lose electricity, and you do know you have some water or something to eat, and know how you're going to communicate or meet family members.
Absolutely. And also, as September, that kind of kicks off something more fun. It's the fall festivals time as well, where you have lots of stuff going on all throughout central Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And this year, particularly as we're recording this here in Lebanon, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Marion County Country Ham Days.
That's correct.
Yes.
And I remember the first one. I'm pretty sure I'm right, Gary. You can check my facts. 50 years ago was a little cloudy at times, but the first one was held in conjunction with the Marion County Fair. The Marion County Fair was new and had just gotten started, and they didn't want the ham days to conflict with the fair, so they held them at the same time. And I can remember at the fairgrounds it being the Marion County Ham Days booth, or it was just a trailer with the flip up sides, and they cooked country ham and biscuits. and served them from the trailer. That's my memory. The first ham days that I worked at was in 1976. They were at the KC Hall. I went out to help them. They were at KC Hall, and at that time, they trimmed or cut all the country hams up by hand with a butcher knife.
Wow.
And so the next year, I invited them to was Key Market, and we sliced them on the saw at Key Market and did the trimming there for many years. And that was a progress. But anyway, that was 1976, and I know you'll interview a lot of people and talk about the early ham days, and there's still some that worked at first ham days. Some of them that I remember, and I'll forget some, but Molly Wathen and Jake Pickerel and Sonny Pickerel, and of course I remember Fabian Buckman and Dick Morasia. They're still alive and well. They were there for the first ham days, and I can remember them. But I was still in high school the first ham days. So, which by the way, this Marion County High School class that's at Marion County now, this senior class that just started, will be the 50th class to graduate from Marion County High School. So this graduation, the 2020 graduating class, will be the 50th class. And in 2021 will be the 50th anniversary of the first graduating class, 1971, class of 71. And
that was your class.
Which I was a member. And very proud of that fact that I was the first graduating class from Marion County High School. And so it's, that's a lot of history, 50 years. Mm-hmm. And, you go into school today, Gary, other than a few areas, the school still looks as good today as it did 50 years ago. Yeah. There was a very futuristic design when the dome was built and the way the school was constructed. You would probably, a lot of people would not believe that the building is 50 years old. So hats off to the folks in Marion County for keeping that school looking the way it looks, and taking good care of that facility.
Absolutely. So you did the first 2 years of your high school class right down the street here.
First 3 years.
First 3 years, okay.
Freshman, sophomore, and junior year were at the old Lebanon High School.
Okay.
And I was really disappointed that I didn't get to, at first, when I didn't get to graduate from Lebanon High School. I was, the class of 70 was the last class, and that really bothered me. But when I got to Marion County High School and I got to be a member of the first graduating class, that was something special.
Yeah.
And
historic. Yeah.
It is, and it gives me a connection. I feel like I'm connected to every graduating class that goes through Marion County High School, that we have that in common, and that's a good thing. I enjoy that, and enjoy the fact that I was a member of the first graduating class, and played on the first football team, and so it was all good.
That's right. You have a connection to both now too.
Yes.
Lebanon and Marion County High Schools. Very good. Well, again, I've been talking with State Senator Jimmy Higdon for an update on what's been going on in Frankfort. And even though it's not officially in session, there's still a lot of stuff happening, still discussions going on. And if you have an issue that you would like to see discussed in the next legislative session, you can contact Jimmy and let him know, because I'm sure we'll get together and talk about what those issues are in the not too distant future.
Absolutely, and to mention some of the festivals coming up in September, you have, of course, Ham Days, Casey County Apple Festival, Bourbon Festival in Barstown, and the Rolling Fork Iron Horse Festival in New Haven. Of course, in October, the Sorghum Festival in Springfield, and the Forkland Festival, and also Barstown Arts and Crafts Festival in October. And I know, Gary, you cover all those events, and I know when my grandkids visit, they always love watching the parades on TV. So, and then after the fall festivals in October, I think it's October 5th, the first turkey social. So the turkey circuit starts October the 5th, and goes over to Holy Trinity and the Berg, and then to St. Catherine, New Haven, to St. Rose, and November the 2nd, I think Calvary has their turkey social, and then November the 9th, I believe I'm correct. St. Augustine will have their turkey social. So it's strange to believe that November is not that far away. Ham Days is a month away. Time waits on no one, and we're moving right along. So look forward to those fall festivals and the fall football season.
Absolutely.
And before you know it, it'll be time for the 2020 General Assembly, and we'll be talking a lot about that in the future. We're already talking about a lot of issues that have come up now as we have our interim meetings, and that we go into session on the first Tuesday after the first Monday at high noon, 2020. So look forward to discussing that at a later date, Gary.
Absolutely. And we also want to mention that in November is election day as well for our statewide officials.
Absolutely. And we have a local magistrate's race on the ballot, plus a appeals court justice will also be on our ballot here in Marion County and Washington and Nelson County also. That's in the same appellate court district. So that's two other things. We encourage everybody to go vote. It's kind of sad in the gubernatorial race when they're projecting only about 30% of Kentucky's registered voters will actually show up and vote, and that's not real good. And over the last several years, there's been a constitutional amendment proposed, excuse me, to move the gubernatorial election back to an even year, either the presidential year or the off year, and so that will continue to be discussed. But as we go into this gubernatorial race and these elections for our statewide officers, all of our constitutional officers will be on the ballot also.
Right.
As that comes to be in November, we'll see that the voter turnout will not be that good. And I tell the school kids, in fact, I'm starting my legislators in school. I'll be going to visit the fifth graders across the district starting in late September. But I tell them from time to time, my generation suffers from a disease we call voter apathy. And you look up apathy in the dictionary, and it simply says you don't care. And so a lot of people are they're content with the way things are, and they don't bother to go vote. And that's when you vote for people, you're actually hiring somebody to work for you. I work for my constituents, and they are my boss. And that's the way you have to look at elections. You're hiring somebody to work for you. And so please go vote. It is important. And so for the life of me, can't think of the date right off.
November 5th.
November 5th. I didn't want to say that. I was thinking that was correct. Yeah. But so November 5th, please go vote, and let's let's break some records. Let's get a 50% voter turnout, because it is an important election. We're electing our statewide officers for the next 4 years, and elections do have consequences. So make sure that you go vote.
Absolutely. And you can still use your traditional driver's license. You don't need the real ID to even do it.
That's correct. And you can vote, absentee. Right. When that time comes up, we'll probably do an interview about that time and talk about how you do a absentee ballot. You have to call and request that they mail you an application. You mail the application in, they mail you the ballot back. You have to mail it in. All that has to be done by mail. Also, usually 2 to 3 weeks prior to the election, the absentee machine is set up at the county clerk's office. And all you have to do to vote absentee on that machine is to raise your right hand and swear that you cannot vote on election day. You'll be out of town, or you're going to have surgery, or if you're if you're pregnant and you're expecting about that time. All those are reasons that you can vote early. But, it's very convenient to do that, to go to the county clerk's office and vote absentee. But like I said, they will ask you to raise your right hand and swear that you won't be available on election day to vote.
Okay. So, again, I've been talking with State Senator Jimmy Higdon. This has been Gary White for Channel 6 Central Kentucky Television.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.